The story of Bugatti is a story of art and tragedy. To understand what I mean, we have to go back to 1881, to a furniture studio in Milan. Carlo Bugatti was already a famous designer when his first son was born, and the boy was raised in a house full of sculptors, painters, and architects. He was expected to become an artist. Instead, he fell in love with engines. His name was Ettore Bugatti, and by the time he was 28, he had founded an automobile company in a small Alsatian town that would go on to win more races than any car ever built. By the late 1920s, Bugatti racing cars dominated almost every circuit in Europe. The brand was synonymous with speed, elegance, and engineering perfection. But despite all of that success, none of it would last. There would be a son who didn't come home from a test drive, a factory taken at gunpoint, a founder who died weeks after winning his company back, and then 50 years of silence. This is the story of Bugatti's incredible rise, its devastating fall, and how a brand left for dead came back to build the fastest production cars the world has ever seen. So stick with me on this one. Ettore Arco Isidoro Bugatti was born in Milan on September 15, 1881. His father, Carlo Bugatti, was an internationally acclaimed Art Nouveau furniture and jewelry designer. His grandfather, Giovanni Luigi Bugatti, was a famous architect and sculptor. His aunt was married to Giovanni Segantini, one of the most celebrated painters in Italy at the time. Even by the standards of 19th century Milan, the Bugatti household was unusual. Beauty was the family business, and Ettore was expected to inherit it. He had a younger brother, Rembrandt, who proved early that the artistic gene had passed to him too. Rembrandt would grow up to become one of the most celebrated animal sculptors in Europe. Bronze elephants, panthers, and big cats that, even today, sell at auction for millions of dollars. Ettore was enrolled at the Brera Academy of Fine Arts to study sculpture. It didn't take. At 14, he was given a motorized tricycle as a gift, and he tore it apart and put it back together. By 16, he had built his own machine from scratch. By 17, he had won an award at the Milan Industry Fair for a four-wheeled racer he had built using two Dadion engines. His father watched all of this and made a decision. Ettore was not going to be a sculptor. So in 1898, Carlo arranged an apprenticeship for his son at Prinetti and Stucchi, a Milanese workshop that built bicycles and motorized tricycles. Ettore was 17 years old. He had no formal engineering training. What he had was a feel for machines, like his father had for wood. He signed the papers, walked into the workshop on his first day, and never seriously thought about sculpture again. Within a year, at Prinetti and Stucchi, Ettore had designed his own car, a four-wheeled racer powered by two engines, which he entered in the 1899 Paris-Bordeaux race. He didn't win, but the design impressed a wealthy patron named Count Guglielmi, who agreed to finance a proper automobile. That car, finished in 1900, won Ettore a gold medal at the Milan Industry Fair, and it changed his life. A German aristocrat named Baron Eugen de Dietrich saw the car, was floored, and offered the 19-year-old a job as technical director at de Dietrich's automobile plant in Niederbronn, in the Alsace region. There was just one problem. Ettore was still a minor under French law. So on July 2, 1901, his father Carlo signed the contract on his behalf. That's how Ettore Bugatti ended up in Alsace. He spent the next 4 years designing larger and larger touring cars, which was the trend at the time. But he didn't believe in the trend. The bigger the engine, the heavier the car, and Ettore had become convinced that weight was the real enemy of speed. He left de Dietrich. He moved to a smaller manufacturer named Matthies. He left Matthies. He moved to Deutz, a gas engine company in Cologne, Germany, where he was put in charge of production. He was now in his late 20s, well paid and miserable. The cars he was being asked to design weren't the ones he wanted to build. So at night, in the basement of his house in Cologne, he started working on something else. A small, lightweight prototype that nobody had asked him to build. He called it the Type 10. It was a 4-cylinder, 1.1-liter engine wrapped in a featherweight chassis that weighed just 365 kilograms, about 800 pounds. Top speed, around 50 miles per hour. For 1908, that was extraordinary. For a car that small, it was unheard of. He drove the prototype around Cologne for over a year, and in 1909, he decided he was done working for other people. In late 1909, at the age of 28, Ettore moved his family to Molsheim, a small town in Alsace, and leased an abandoned dye works. On January 1st, 1910, he officially opened the doors of Automobile's Ettore Bugatti. The first car off the line was a refined version of his Cologne basement prototype, the Bugatti Type 13. It weighed about 500 kilograms, roughly 1,100 pounds, and was powered by a 1.3-liter four-cylinder engine producing 30 horsepower. Top speed was around 60 miles per hour. In a world of brutish, heavy luxury cars, the Type 13 looked like a toy, but it cornered like nothing else on the road. Ettore had already figured out that racing was going to be his marketing department. He entered the Type 13 at the French Grand Prix at Le Mans in 1911, where it finished second behind a car with 3 times its engine size. The motoring press lost its mind. Then, in 1921, 4 Type 13s entered the Italian Grand Prix at Brescia and finished first, second, third, and fourth. From that day on, the car was known as the Type 13 Brescia. In 1907, in the middle of all this, Ettore married Barbara Mascherpa. Their first son, Giannoberto Maria Carlo Bugatti, was born on January 15, 1909, in Cologne, just months before the family moved to Molsheim. He would go by the French version of his name, Jean, and he would grow up inside the factory. The next decade belonged to Bugatti. In 1924, Ettore launched the Type 35, a 2-liter, 8-cylinder Grand Prix car with cast aluminum wheels and a hollow-forged front axle that weighed only 10 kilograms on its own. Over the next 6 years, the Type 35 and its variants won approximately 2,500 races. 5 consecutive Targa Florios from 1925 to 1929, the inaugural Monaco Grand Prix in 1929. No racing car before or since has won as much. The man at the wheel for many of those wins was a young Monegasque driver named Louis Chiron, who would become the most famous Bugatti factory driver of the era. Remember that name. It comes back at the end of this story. In 1927, he launched the Type 41 Royale, the longest and most expensive automobile in the world, designed for kings. He built 6. He sold 3. By 1929, Bugatti was one of the most respected luxury and racing brands on earth. But the world was about to come apart, and the Bugatti family would not escape it. The first storm had actually come 15 years earlier. In August 1914, the First World War broke out. Alsace was still German territory, and Bugatti, an Italian citizen working in Germany, was caught on the wrong side of every border. He fled. The family moved first to Milan, then to Paris, where Ettore offered his designs to the French government. He spent the war years working on aircraft engines, including an 8-cylinder design that was licensed and built under contract by Duesenberg in the United States. The war devastated the Bugatti family in another way. Ettore's brother Rembrandt, the sculptor, had volunteered as a medical aide at a military hospital in Antwerp. The experience broke him. On January 8, 1916, after months of depression and money troubles, Rembrandt took his own life in Paris. He was 31. When the war ended, Alsace was returned to France, and Ettore was suddenly a French citizen and a French manufacturer. He returned to Molsheim in 1919 and threw himself into work. The Type 13 Brescia dominated the early 1920s. The Type 35 dominated the late 1920s. The Type 41 Royale was supposed to be the masterpiece, the longest car in the world, the most expensive, the most exclusive ever built. Then, in October 1929, the American stock market collapsed. and the orders for $30,000 luxury cars built for European royalty simply stopped coming. The Great Depression turned the Type 41 Royale into a punchline. 6 had been built, 3 had been sold. The other 3 sat in the factory, unwanted. By 1934, Bugatti was nearly bankrupt. The French government approached Ettore with an unexpected offer: design a rail car. With no other option, he accepted. He took the Royale's massive 12.8-liter 8-cylinder engine, built for monarchs, and adapted it for a passenger train. Over the next few years, he designed roughly 80 Bugatti auto rails for the French National Railway. Some of them stayed in service into the 1950s. They saved the company. Meanwhile, Ettore's son Jean had grown up inside the factory. He had watched his father design cars and his uncle build sculptures, and by his early 20s, he was running the design department. In 1932, at the age of 23, Jean did most of the bodywork design for the new Type 41 Royale. In 1934, he designed the Type 57, the company's most successful Grand Tourer, of which 710 would be built. And in 1936, he designed the Type 57 SC Atlantic, one of the most beautiful cars ever made. Only 4 were built. Jean's personal Atlantic, painted dark blue and known as La Voiture Noire, the black car, vanished during the chaos of World War II and has never been found. It is the most valuable missing car in the world. That same year, after a long workers' strike at the Molsheim factory that Ettore handled badly, Jean took over day-to-day operations. He was 27 years old. The company was effectively his. Under Jean, Bugatti returned to international racing. The Type 57 tank, a streamlined version of the Type 57, won the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1937 and again in 1939. The 1939 win was the bigger one. The car had been re-engineered to handle the heat of a long endurance race, and at Le Mans that June, it dominated. Jean watched it cross the finish line. He was 30 years old. He had a wife. He had a daughter. He was running one of the most respected automobile companies in the world. He had everything. 2 months later, he took the same car out for a test drive on a closed road outside the factory. On August 11, 1939, Jean Bugatti was driving the Le Mans-winning Type 57 tank on the road between Molsheim and Strasbourg. The road had been closed for the test. A drunk cyclist found a hole in the tree fence beside the road and stumbled out into Jean's path. Jean jerked the wheel to avoid him. The car hit a tree. He died on the spot. He was 30 years old. Ettore broke down in tears when he heard the news. His brother had taken his own life in the last war. Now his son, his successor, the boy who had been raised inside the factory and supposed to take it all over, was gone too. He never fully recovered. 3 weeks later, on September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. The Second World War had begun. In 1940, Germany invaded France, and Alsace was once again on the wrong side of the border. The Bugatti factory at Molsheim was confiscated by the Nazi regime and turned over to a German engineer named Hans Trippel, who renamed it Trippelwerke and used it to build amphibious military vehicles for the German army. Ettore was forced to sell the factory at a fraction of its value. He fled to Paris and lived out the war there. The losses kept coming. In 1944, his wife Barbara died. He was 63 years old, living in a Paris apartment, separated from the factory and from the son who would have inherited it. After the war ended in 1945, the factory was returned to the French state, and then, when French communist saboteurs damaged the buildings further, left in ruins. Ettore began a long legal fight to recover what had been his. In 1946, he was granted French citizenship, the country he had loved since boyhood, even when its borders kept shifting around him. In 1947, after years of court battles, the factory at Molsheim was officially returned to him. But by then his health was gone. He had suffered a stroke. he was partially paralyzed. He was 65 years old. On August 21st, 1947, just weeks after winning his factory back, Ettore Bugatti died in a hospital in Paris. He was buried in the family plot at Dorlisheim, near Molsheim, beside his son Jean and his brother Rembrandt. The factory tried to continue. Ettore's younger son Roland and a small team built a few prototypes of the Type 101 in the early 1950s, but the post-war luxury market had no use for a 1930s Grand Tourer with a new body. The cars didn't sell. In 1963, the entire company was sold to Hispano-Suiza for its aerospace business. The automobile side quietly ceased to exist. For the next 24 years, the Bugatti name produced nothing. The factory was empty. Most people assumed that was the end of the story. In 1987, an Italian entrepreneur named Romano Artioli bought the rights to the Bugatti name. Artioli was nearly 60 years old, a self-made businessman who had built a fortune importing Japanese cars into Italy. He had been a teenager when Bugatti closed in 1947 and had never gotten over it. So he decided to bring it back. He built a brand new factory in Campogalliano near Modena, in the middle of Italy's Motor Valley, home to Ferrari, Lamborghini, and Maserati. He hired the engineers who had designed the Lamborghini Miura and the Countach. He commissioned a carbon fiber chassis from the French aerospace company Aerospatiale, a technology no production car had ever used before. On September 15, 1991, Ettore Bugatti's 110th birthday, Artioli unveiled the EB110 in Paris, on the steps of the Grande Arche de la Défense. 10,000 people attended. The car had a 3.5-liter quad-turbo V12, all-wheel drive, 553 horsepower, and a top speed of 218 miles per hour. Alain Delon drove one down the Champs-Élysées. Michael Schumacher bought a yellow Supersport with his first Formula One championship paycheck. It didn't last. A global recession, a $200,000 sticker price, and Artioli's ill-fated acquisition of Lotus pushed the company into bankruptcy in 1995. About 128 EB110s had been built. Then Volkswagen showed up. In 1998, under chairman Ferdinand Piëch, VW bought the rights to the Bugatti name and moved the brand back to Molsheim, to the old factory site. They spent 7 years and reportedly over $1 billion developing a car most engineers thought was impossible. In 2005, they released it, the Bugatti Veyron. 1,001 horsepower, 253 miles per hour, the fastest production car ever built. In 2016, they followed it with the Chiron, a car named after Louis Chiron, the Monegasque driver who had won Grand Prix after Grand Prix for Ettore Bugatti almost a century earlier. And in 2019, on a closed test track in Germany, a modified Bugatti Chiron Supersport became the first production car ever to cross 300 miles per hour. The verified speed was 304.773. Ettore Bugatti died with his factory in ruins. His son died at the wheel of a car he had built. And somehow, more than 90 years after Ettore's first cars rolled out of an old Alsatian dye works, the brand they built is still in Molsheim, still chasing the impossible numbers that obsessed him in his basement in Cologne. And that is the story of Bugatti. If you enjoyed this one, hit the like button and subscribe, and tap that notification bell so you don't miss the next founder story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.